Morning, Jones.
Morning. How are you?
I'm very fine. Were you able to get Francis? I've sent him the link.
Which Francis? Francis or Lawrence?
Lawrence, sorry, Lawrence.
Yes, he has a medical emergency today.
Okay.
So he will not join us today.
Okay, perfect. It's okay.
Yeah, we'll still grab him for next time. Unfortunately, yeah, he has an emergency in the family.
Okay. That's okay.
Faith and David, are you able to get us clearly? If possible, unmute your mic. Right? Faith, are you able to unmute your mic? Moniki, good morning.
Morning.
Fine, Moniki. Thanks so much. I would want you to open with the word of prayer, Moniki, kindly, before we can start.
Are you hearing me?
I should be able to get you.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, Moniki.
Come before you this morning. We are asking your blessing as we have this meeting this morning. Lead us and make us learn more so that we can be better and to serve our clients as we need to. We pray this believing and trusting in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks so much for the prayer, Moniki. And to the rest of the members, welcome for this webinar. Jones will be taking us through a case study of their place, that is the ICC. So I hope you're going to learn just, let's be as keen as possible and follow up the presentation. Jones, welcome and take up the stage.
All right, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, fantastic. I'm excited to be with you guys again this morning. It's still early morning here. The weather is changing slightly. We've just come from a very, very hot 2 weeks. And now we're going into what we call the autumn. And the usual temperatures begin to drop around this time with a bit of rain and wind. But the good thing is that we are still working from home most of the time. Now it's very interesting. I think the change that has happened is, I see it as a change that is likely to not only impact our roles, but also impact the way our organizations actually will be doing business from now onwards. Of course, we did struggle quite a little bit to adjust when the pandemic started and people had to close and begin to work from home. There was quite a bit of a struggle, which I think all of you that perhaps have experienced this are also feeling it or have felt it. The challenges of not being able to see your colleagues, those of us that have relied on what we call the body language to be able to do your work effectively. Again, the distance has made us really, really suffer in that regard. For those that have been used to the coziness and the facilities of the office, again, we've seen quite that hampered by people working from home. But overall, I think it's an interesting experience. It's the kind of experience that we within the information management, records management, and archives, I think have need to look at with a new eye, and also to listen differently. We have different problems which require now very innovative solutions. Now, last time when we were discussing, we introduced the concept of the blueprinting and the concept of doing a blueprinting exercise before you implement or you introduce any technology. And in the process, we looked at one specific area which I believe that every information manager, every records manager, every archivist now should be skilled enough to perform, which is conducting what we call business analysis. And of course, business analysis, we shared last time how important it is. It's an aspect of an exercise that is done before projects are implemented that involve technology. And many of us have seen in your responses and inputs, either you are in the middle of implementing something, or you are thinking of implementing something, or have already implemented something and you're in the process of reviewing the project itself, the delivery of the project itself. So we say that business analysis is a very, very important aspect of it. Now, today we are going to go through a simple case study, one which is very familiar to me, and at the same time, is very familiar for those that perhaps have experienced what we call the filing process. In this case, we're going to look at a simple case that involves the electronic filing of judicial records. Now, the fact that I've chosen electronic filing for judicial records is deliberate because I anticipate that the concept of filing is more or less common to all of us. And we have experienced this, or we are experiencing this on a daily basis in various forms. Some of us are in the registries. We are experiencing filing in the different record centers. We have some form of filing in the libraries and in the archives and so on. So this concept of electronic filing is not new. But it has been made even much more real now in the pandemic. I remember last time, I don't know who it was who was sharing about the changes that have happened in the judiciary in Kenya that have led to cases being conducted online or virtually, involving a lot of electronic filing. So this particular case today, I think, is pertinent. It's very, it brings us closer to what we know, what we experience. Now we're going to approach this case today from the point of view of doing a business analysis. Now, in the business analysis here, we are going to imagine that we are information managers who are tasked. They are tasked with the challenge of gathering requirements before either an electronic filing system or a records filing system or a document filing system is put in place. So imagine yourself as an information manager, a records manager, an archivist who has been tasked to be part of this project, this implementation project for an electronic filing for judicial records. If you are tasked to do this and your role in the project is to do the business analysis, in other words, to gather requirements and verify those requirements with stakeholders, What are the tools you're going to use, and how are you going to start this exercise? So I've shared already, you will see on your screen the simple case. We're beginning with painting what we call a scope diagram. So it's very, very important that we, from the minute we start, we need to understand what is the extent of the project in a very, very simple way. Not too many words, but in a simple diagram. That's why a scoping diagram becomes a very, very key tool for you to use. As you can see on the screen, it's very simple. It's a very simple diagram. And it's one that any one of you can develop for any project, for any implementation, and very, very quickly. So what do you see in this scoping diagram? In this scoping diagram, you begin to see the extent of the stakeholders, the main stakeholders in the exercise. So because we've chosen an electronic filing, so we are limiting ourselves to the stakeholders that are participating in the filing process. Now, for the case, in the case of the International Criminal Court, where I apply my professional services, it's a very important part of the judicial process, electronic filing, because we have what we call counsels from all over the world. We have operations from all over the world. Filings are coming 24/7. And it's important that each filing is received in order, but at the same time, it's received in a manner that facilitates the prompt or expeditious judicial activity around it. So that's why for us, it's very important that all our filings are done electronically. And there are many other reasons as to why. But as a system analyst, we begin now from the bare bones. We begin with the basic. We begin by asking questions. Who are the players? In our case, we have a very important player called the court record assistant. Now, the court record assistant has a specific information management or records management role. It's almost like a registry role in the process. These court record assistants are the ones that receive and process filings. They're the ones that do the verification. They're the ones that see, certify the filings. Are the filings okay? Are they in order? Are the metadata properly applied? Those are the court record assistants. We have then the court officers. Of course, you know, the court officers, primarily these are professionals of legal expertise. And of course, their job is to facilitate the court process. They are the ones that are ultimately responsible for the proper conduct of the and the movement of documents and filings within a court session or a hearing, for example. So that you always find, in our case, the court officers are the ones that do the various approvals that may be needed. Approvals for filings, approvals for exceptions, escalations from the court record assistants go to the court officers. A very important group. Then you have the translation team, of course, or system or group. And of course, these are the ones in our case that do the translation, mainly because each of our documents need to be translated either in English if they're in French, or French if they're in English. At the same time, they need to be translated in the language, into the language of the accused or the victims. So this becomes, translation becomes a key part of this process. And then, of course, the most important actor in our case is the submitter. Now, the submitter could be any participant in the court process. Could be a defense lawyer, could be a victim's lawyer, a victim's counsel, or a representative of either a victim, or it could even be witness, a staff from the witness management, lawyers from the chambers, lawyers from the office of prosecutor. So these submitters are now, those are the ones that do the actual work of submitting, which to us is synonymous to initiating a filing. So you can see that's what the scope diagram tells us. And now it's very important for us to understand the scope diagram before we can go into any other exercise. Now you ask yourself, once I've understood the scope diagram, as a business analyst, my role as a business, what is the next thing that I need to do? In this case, we have an instrument which we are calling the use case diagram. Again, you'll see the use case diagram is usually a very, very simple diagram, but it's a very, very important diagram. It's a diagram that is often relied on by the technology implementers. Could be the developers, could be the solution integrators, or the teams, the technical teams that are responsible for putting in place the electronic solution that we need for filing. But at the same time, it's not a technical document as such. It's more or less a business document. That's why it's very important for us to understand it from the information management perspective, also from the records and archives perspective, but within the role of a business analyst in the project. So what do you find in a use case diagram? The use case diagram here, you begin to see what we call the various use cases. In other words, you begin to see the various actions that, or activities that are performed within the filing process by the various actors. So you can see, for example, I have an activity here which we call submit filing. The reason why we are calling it a use case because it's an activity that starts and is initiated either by an individual or by a role and is independent and ends within itself. So it starts and has to find an end, a logical end. So a submitter will want to submit a filing. So submit filing, a main requirement, a requirement. The solution or the system must be able to allow a submitter to submit a filing. So often you'll find that this use case also can easily become the headings for your requirements documents, on how your requirement documents are arranged. You may find that in some instances, you can also follow this sequence and give yourself at least a table of index. Then you also see, for example, process filing. So we start with submit filing, which is done by the submitter. Process filing, you remember who we said processes filings? Let me just make this a bit smaller so you can see. Yeah. The court records assistant. Now, these are the ones that process filing. So they receive the filings electronically from the submitter through the submit filing use case or submit filing function or activity, and they begin to do the processing. Now, in our case, the processing could involve various things: checking metadata, enriching, adding other pertinent metadata, for example, like the classification, the distribution list, and so on. And then maybe also going to the extent of even applying digital signatures and stamps to the document. So that's the job that is done by the court records assistants. In the process, you'll also see there's a request for translation. A request for translation is also a use case, a specific use case. There's also a function, and it can be initiated by the submitter. As you can see from this case, a submitter can also initiate a request for translation. Also, the court records assistant can also request for translation. And on and on. So you can see a use case diagram is a list of the main use cases that will constitute the filing process. Now, it's important when you're doing the analysis to spend a bit of more time here, because this is where you can forget something. You can forget a main use case here, and your system is implemented lopsided, missing something. So we spend quite a lot of time here trying to make sure that we have listed all the various use cases and assigned to their respective actors. Now, you might find that there are some very interesting use cases which can easily be forgotten. For example, in our case, once a filing has been submitted, it has been approved by the court records officer, and now, after approval, it is being distributed by the court record assistant. You can see it's being distributed here. Now, the fact that within the system, the court records assistants are distributing the filing, there's an automatic process which sends notifications to all the participants that are in the distribution list. All the participants that perhaps may also be in the access list. Now, it's important to look at this also because this notification is not done by a specific actor, a human actor, but is done by a system. It's a system role. So once the approvals are done, then the system, there's a system function or a system role that now kicks off and sends notifications. So that's why you can see it's important when we do the use case diagram. We have use cases, we have activities that are done by humans, but also those that are done by the system. So it's very important to see that. That's why I have specifically put it there so that you can actually see. Now, here is one of the most important points for information and records managers, because this is now where you insert the specific use cases that are also relevant to records management and also perhaps to retention, to lifecycle management, and so on. Now you begin to see them, and some of them are introduced in a very interesting way. For example, you have relating a filing. You're relating a filing, the same, almost similar to relating records together. So it's a specific use case for that, which needs to be described, which should be described later in detail, a bit more. Things that are important, but perhaps are not very well handled at the beginning of such projects, things like deleting filings, modifying filings. It's very important that we have specific use cases for that so that you can build requirements and use those to evaluate the criteria for systems, either for systems to be procured or integrated or developed. So that's the importance of a use case diagram. try to make it as comprehensive but less technical in a very simple format. Once you have done the use case diagram, from this is not enough for you to begin to understand the entire picture of what is going on. Often, the next important activity that we need to get involved in is what we call the process mapping. Now, the process mapping begins to now take us closer to what is happening on the ground and what the stakeholders are also expecting to see in the new process. So this is where now again we spend a big part of our time studying and drawing and analyzing. As you can see, I haven't even started writing anything. I'm just drawing. And drawing is extremely important because this is a part where you begin to interact with stakeholders and ask questions. And ask important questions. And when you ask questions based on a process map, when you're seated with stakeholders, it is very easy for them to understand what you're talking about than sending them long lists of requirements or standards for them to review, to comply with. This begin to give you a very important starting point when you're building requirements. Let's have a look at it a little bit. Now, if you ignore the greens are just my notes. The notes that I've put in place, or some of them could be questions that I want to follow up later or ask later. But if you just see the main organization here, I've drawn three, what we call 3 swim lanes. It's like a pool. This diagram is normally called a pool. And this, what you see here, these are swim lanes. So you can see a submitter swim lane, a court records assistant swim lane, a court officer swim lane. Now, why do it this way? It's important to do it this way because then we can see the sequence of roles that each one of these actors play from the start of the process until the end of the process. Because it's a filing process, it always starts with a submitter submitting a filing. So you can see there's a box here clearly saying submit filing. And the wording here is very important. There's always a verb followed by an object or a noun. That's the best way to depict a process on a process diagram. So you can see here, the submitter here submits a filing. Now, once that filing has been submitted, it goes all the way to the court records assistant who will do the processing, who will process the filing. Now, as soon as the filing has been processed, if we follow the arrow closely, we'll see that it goes straight to the court officer who is going to approve the filing. Now, once the court officer approves the filing, then the filing can be distributed to the participants. And also the submitter is notified that the filing is approved and has been distributed to stakeholders or to the parties. Now we call this part the happy path. The happy path means that everything moving smoothly, the submitter comes in, submits a filing, it's processed, it's approved, and it's distributed, and the process ends. But there are a lot of things here that we as information managers want to understand. So this is the place we begin to ask questions. So some of the questions you can see I've put in yellow. These are questions that are put for discussion either with participants or with the court records assistants or the court officers or even the submitters. What do they do with drafts, for example? Should submit filing allow them to process drafts and hold them for a while, and once they are ready, submit? You see, so questions like those. Now, if they say, yes, we do have drafts, then we begin, what is the life cycle of those drafts? What is the retention of those drafts? What do we do after the document has been submitted? What do you do with the versions that remain? So those are some of the questions we begin to ask here. Some of them are interesting questions. Let's see, for example, if the court records assistants find that the filing has not been submitted properly, or there's some metadata missing or some inconsistency, they may as well return. They can return the filing back to the submitter, again electronically. So here, of course, we also have questions. As an information manager, I will ask, okay, fine, the court records assistants can return the filing, but is there a record of the return and the date and time and reason? We may find that systems are put in place where this happens, but there is no record, there is no business log that somebody can go to and say, this is the reason why so-and-so did this. So again, with a process map, this is where we begin now to identify anchor points where we can put in our input. So it's very important as information managers to really scrutinize this and use this process map to the extent, to the fullest extent possible. Now we fill this with a lot of questions, and then from here we usually have sessions. We have meetings and sessions with the stakeholders so that they fully understand. Everybody should be on board even before the work starts to procure or to build such a system. It's extremely important that people understand the process map. Now, of course, the process map will have exceptions. Not everything goes through a happy path. There may be exceptions. For example, I ask a question here, what happens to amended filings? How are they managed? How are they handled? You see? What happens to filings that are connected, for example? So you have, for example, a decision and a dissenting opinion. So the dissenting opinion is connected to the main decision of the judges. So how are those filed? How are those treated? How are those relationships kept together? So this is an important part to begin to ask such questions. And often we find that we spend, I think I can arguably say that we spend 40% of our time in doing the requirements gathering and the analysis at this level. We spend a lot of time at this level with stakeholders. Now, once we are satisfied that there is a general understanding, a proper understanding of the filing or the submission process, then now we can go into the details. You can see when you have such a diagram like this, then it is now easy to go into the details. How do we go into the details? Again, it is so simple, but it takes a deliberate and a straightforward an action that is planned and sequential. So the next thing we're going to do here is to look at the submit filing process. If we look at the submit filing process, we may find that inside we also need to examine it to see what are the requirements at the submit filing. That's why I've made another tab here just to expose the submit filing process alone. Okay. And you shall see why it is important to do that. Now, because I've exposed the submit filing alone, the submit filing is a process that is initiated by the submitter and is also completed by the submitter. So you can see we don't have the other roles here. We just have the submitter role. So what do? They start off by finding a case, finding the relevant case that they want to file in. Now, once they've found the relevant case, then they find the document type or the filing type that they want to file, and then they upload their document or documents, and then proceed to submit the filing. So you can see it looks straightforward, but inside there are different nuances. And that's why you can see again the green, there are many questions which I am asking. For example, when people are filing, when our submitters are filing, there are different types of judicial documents that they are going to file. Sometimes they will file the main filing or the main document. Sometimes they may file corrections of previous filings. So again, that's very important. This is where we begin to track that. They may also want to file redacted documents. In other words, documents that are reductions of confidential filings, for example. So a participant may have filed a confidential document, but at the same time produced also a public redacted document with the confidential information redacted out. So again, we ask, how is that handled? Some participants will have a main document and hundreds of annexes, even thousands of annexes for one filing. So yes, okay, how should we handle that? That's why you can see here, it's not just a simple sort of process like this one. We have drawn it differently to mean that this is a sub-process. In other words, we may need to go inside here and see exactly what are we talking about. How do we handle all these different types of documents? So step by step, we produce rules and agree on requirements for each of these documents. And then there is the upload. The upload, of course, can be assumed from our point of view, we can assume it's simply dragging and dropping a document or finding a document and uploading it. But in many times when it comes to judicial documents or judicial records, it's a bit more complicated than that. That's why, again, we are seeing here that it's a process, because sometimes you may file one document, but sometimes you may want to file hundreds of documents in one go. So again, we need to examine and see how is that process going to be handled. And of course, there are questions here. For example, if somebody is filing both public and confidential documents, how are they going to apply the metadata? Are they going to apply the metadata one by one, or are they going to apply the metadata in bulk? For example, the classification in bulk. So these are very, very important questions to ask at this point. And often omitted is the fact that a submitter may not be ready to submit at that time because they are still busy gathering documents. So again, we need to imagine that, hey, the system should allow them at least to save before they submit. So that's why you can see there's a save process there, and which they can easily initiate before they do a filing. So you can see how it is going. So we've just gone back. If we go back to the main process, we've basically expanded the submit filing process. And this process is done throughout, so that in such a way that once you work yourself through, let me just show you briefly, just flying over it. Now, if I go to determine the file type, you can see again, we've tried to draw it out and say, okay, what does that mean? What happens when somebody is determining a filing type? And when somebody says, okay, I'm filing a core filing, for example, what does it mean to the process? What does it mean to the metadata? What does it mean to the classification? Okay. In our case, we may find that down along the line, somebody will say that I am filing a secret document. So again, there are specific rules of how secret documents need to be handled. So again, this is a place now we begin to look at the specifics of the filing itself and determining the rules. Let's go back up a little bit. And the same process we also take to examine what is it and how are they uploading the documents. Now this one, again, is very important for us to ask questions at any one time. When they're doing this, you begin to notice interesting things which are so important for records managers. In the process of uploading, once the filing, the type has been confirmed, of course, there are certain questions we ask. Is it an annex? If it's an annex, then they upload the annex. And if it's an annex, there could be one or two, or it could be hundreds or thousands. So again, we imagine how they're going to do that. What is the mandatory metadata that they need when a filing or an annex is being done? That's why you can see now here we've made two parts, one just for the main document and one for the annexes. Because the annexes in our case, has a different set of metadata that is needed, different requirements, and also the main document has got a different metadata requirements. Now, this is where we begin to wrestle with formats. What are they going to file? How are they going to file it? In our case, we require each participant, each submitter, to file also a Word version. Why? Because of translation. And if they file a Word version, of course, it's important they are able to import it together with the original. If it's a PDF, they're also filing. That's very important. Before it completes an upload, there is that requirement. So it goes on and on and on. From the process map, we go step by step, examining each of these processes, going down to approve, to distribute, and so on. And just this exercise alone for the submit filing, if done properly, can take you at least 2 to 3 months. 2 to 3 months working with stakeholders in the organization to validate, to verify, and to make sure that there is a common understanding of the process even before systems are built. It is so, so important. We fight a lot and struggle to do postmortems when systems have already been procured and implemented. And we find out that important requirements have been missed out. And that's how our implementations begin to fail and making us lose lots of money and time in the process. So my encouragement is that you shouldn't underestimate the importance of an exercise like this. It looks almost as if it's perhaps something out of the realm of the traditional records managers and so on, but I'll differ and say this is a role, this is a skill that we all need to acquire. It's a skill that we all need to build, to bring on board, so that we can be able to be more impactful, more helpful, and more influential also in our organizations. It is at this point that we can intelligently insert recommendations which are either from standards-based approach thinking or from the process of looking at requirements, either legal requirements or records management requirements, or life cycle, information life cycle requirements. This is the area to begin to do that. Once requirements are already typed and written out, it's often very, very difficult to review and to see what is missing, unless it is presented in a way that we can follow in a flow step by step. It becomes extremely difficult. And now for us, for information managers, we take a leading role. This exercise for me in my organization is led by information managers and records managers, because these are the people that are closest to the business. These are the people that understand the needs of the business. And once this is done, then the IT people, the programmers, the administrators, the IT administrators, the database administrators, the network engineers now can begin to use diagrams like this to implement systems and to integrate systems. Then now we become a very useful professional unit or team in the ecosystem. So if you ask yourself, in the post-COVID era, what are some of the skills that all of us need to acquire and assume? I would say a business analysis skill is at the top of the list. It's one of the ones that at the top of our list we need to have. It gives us the ability to think as a business, at the same time to think also as an implementer, while giving us the freedom to look at the enterprise in a way that allows us to be intelligent and also allows us to really point out which standards are applicable at what point, under which process, which rules should be applied where, and this way we build trust within the organization. Now, this exercise, I brought it up for us to have a look because I wanted to make it real for you to see, for example, what it is that records and information managers are actually doing. What do we spend our time doing in organizations like the International Criminal Court? This is part of the work. This is what takes a big deal of our time. Even for me in particular, before I go ahead and either manage or run implementation projects, I have to make sure that this exercise is done properly. So at this time, I'm sure some of you may have some questions that you want to ask. I will allow you some time now. Let me check if there are any other questions in the chat. If there are no questions in the chat, maybe some of you already can raise up your hands and see if you want to interject or comment, or perhaps even just ask a question, because this is the time to do that. It's very, and I'm happy to be here to help you in any way to understand any aspect that perhaps you think that you haven't understood clearly. So up to you, Collins.
Thanks so much, Jones, for the presentation. I think it's been wonderful. I've been following it keenly, and I hope all the participants have also been following the presentation. Mine is just a comment. The whole aspect of business process maps needs somebody to understand the organization so well before putting it in place. So I need to encourage most of us who would want at least to develop something, or they have something. They need to think critically, and it shouldn't be a one-man thought. You know, it's a general organization business. So it needs also other mindsets to be able to ensure that the process maps are populated as intense as this is. And by the way, this looks very simple, yeah, but from the starting shot, you say that it can even take 3 months. It's not that simple. Yeah. It's not that simple. And I think these are food for thought to us as participants. And it is an eye opener for us to really reskill and ensure that we have such skills to enable us to do something better. And also this, the Bitaji model, because this is the Bitaji model, I believe. It's also good for us to have some input on how it works, to be able also to do it perfectly. So over to Boniface. I wish to pass the mic to Boniface so that Boniface can take part of the question and answer session. Boniface.
Thank you very much, Collins. Thank you very much, Jones. That was really very good. At least we learned something from what we learned at that time. I'll take this opportunity to just ask in case there's anyone who has a question that want to be shared out, because I've looked at the chat box and I can't see any. So anyone want to speak, maybe you can raise your hand and then you can ask the Jones anything. Anyone?
Yeah, while they are still also checking, I'll just comment also the fact that this exercise also is one that should be formally integrated into your projects. So whenever you look at your projects, any of your projects, and you see that the activity called business analysis is missing, do raise an alarm, do raise a hand and say, hey, how come this activity business analysis is missing? It's a very important role in any of information management projects. If you don't have a business analysis role or functions, in some of your organizations, you perhaps may have actually a defined role, either business analyst. So you may find those a lot in maybe organizations that are like the banks, the private sector and so on, because they see the importance of this role that they've even defined specific individuals to perform this role. But then you find that in many of our institutions, especially the government and so on, this is a role that is often skipped over. That's why for us as information managers, whenever we are looking at projects which are within our control, within our sphere, it's so important that we check to see if the business analysis role is provided or not. In many instances, it may also require a bit of training. And this is where you may find that actually maybe some of your teams or yourselves actually need additional training on business analysis. So this is an aspect where it could be very interesting. And if you think that within your organizations also, this is something that you need, really need, also do let me know, because there are ways in which we can try to help, or do let either your colleagues here, your leaders here to know, and we can find ways in which that training can also be provided to your teams on the ground. It is so important. I will not stress really less on it, but to give it really my highest priority if you haven't experienced the opportunity to learn really how to do a proper business analysis.
Okay, thank you very much.
I hope it hasn't been too too scientific or too engineering for most of us.
No, it's okay.
Okay, very
It's
good.
been very, yeah. In case there's any other question, anyone who has a comment, additional idea, this suggestion. Okay, it seems everyone it's verified. I'll give Sefu Muswe from Botswana to just to say something.
Very good.
Sefu, can you hear me? Sefu? Collins, is he muted? Is she muted? Maybe she can say something.
Yeah, everyone has the right to unmute. Huh?
Pardon?
She's muted, but you can unmute.
Okay. Okay, if the safe is not there, Dr. Naftali Chwer, can you say something?
Hello, I really don't really have much to say, but I think I'm quite impressed on how Dr. has really presented the business analysis, because basically this is where we miss in terms of records and information and archives and information management, because normally we miss this point. And basically when the systems that are implemented in our ministries, we find that the record management aspect miss simply because we have not done the business analysis. So the way Dr. has really put it, it's actually is a very critical area that we need to be conversant with. We need to know how to go about it. And from there, I think now we can have a voice. We can be able to say, look here, guys, we are missing something here, because we have already an idea of what's supposed to be implemented. I'm really impressed, Dr. on how you have done it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mika Rachuonyo. Mika?
Thank you. Actually, I've been following this while driving. I just arrived when Daktari was finishing, and I really appreciate this. I'm hoping to start another meeting in a few minutes, so that's why I'm talking a little low, though the meeting has not started. But I think we thank Daktari for this. I think the next thing now we should be thinking of is, what are these skills for a business analyst? That should now be the next question I think we are asking ourselves. To become a business analyst, what are these additional skills we require? Otherwise, thank you, Daktari. We are happy to always have you give us glimpses of some of these things, so that we can be able to improve wherever we are responsible at. Otherwise, thank you so much.
Okay, that's very good. Collins, maybe I'll hand over. I'll just have to hand it over to you to conclude, unless there is anyone who wants really to say something.
Okay, thanks so much, Bonson. I can see Benjamin Kinopia. He works with judiciary. Wish maybe you can say something before you can close. Benjamin.
Thank you, Collins. Thank you, Dr. Jones. I think that was a very insightful presentation. Maybe what I would maybe want to add is just to echo what Collins had spoken of earlier, that this is a very critical element in the whole process. It doesn't take a short time, it takes a very long time. And there are a lot of collaborative efforts, both internally and externally, because you have to really consult. As much as you may understand the institution, you need to consult widely. So it is a very highly consultative process, which goes to the very success of what you intend to achieve. So thank you very much for this presentation. I think, as Rachonyo has said, the next thing is, what are these skills? Because what happens normally is that you'll sit in a team, and then all these skills are brought together. The business analyst, the ICT component, all those come together. But probably for us as information managers, that might be the next thing that we should be looking at. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Benjamin. And before I close, I wish to thank John for the wonderful presentation.
Collins?
I believe everyone, yes.
Hello, Collins. Just before you close, the Cleophas will really like to say something. I hope he's online.
Okay.
Cleophas, Daktari.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Jones, for your sessions. I missed the last one, but I'm excited that the conversations are going on well. Just listening to the session this morning, I think the very themes that we started with earlier, stakeholder management, the various skills, mapping, the understanding the business are still coming out up to now. And I think it's just, the whole story of understand the process when the systems are being built. I think that's the whole thing why we talked about visioning technology. I know there have been even a specific question around the formats to be filed in our e-files. What formats do you want and why do you want them? Of course, Jones did indicate they would ask for award files for translation. And so we've seen then there's a lot of decisioning, there's a lot of questions we will have to answer as we walk through this. So excited that the conversations are going on the way they are, and they are opening to us insights on the many other areas we need to reflect on. What Chua has just raised, what Kenothia has just also mentioned. So I think it's a moment for us to just again step back, reflect and ask ourselves individually and even collectively in our functions, how are we aligned around these areas? I've picked the issue of business analysis, the issue of process mapping in itself, from a records management perspective, the issues of, all those things that Daktari has brought up. And I think we are putting up, cataloging all these skills, and I'm sure as we go on, we will be figuring out how to even narrow down to even the more specific. I've done this process mapping, but from a banking side, and I know it's not an easy thing. And perhaps it's some of the things we'll be reaching out and asking those of us here who are heading records management functions. Maybe you would consider even about some in-house custom-made engagements for your records management team around business analysis, so that then it's more contextualized and not just theoretical. But we'll explore those options as we go on. But I'm just excited, Dr. Jones, that I think you bring out this very strongly, and just letting us know that this even takes 40% of the time, just the kind of energy it requires. So excited that we've been able to join. Thank you so much, members. I've seen quite a lot of people. Faith and Chile, thank you for staying on with us for as always. Commend Beatrice, thank you, and many other. Dr. Tsebo from Botswana and the rest, thank you so much. Let's just keep this conversation going, and please, let's be engaging. I'm not seeing a lot of questions from people, so I'm a bit worried whether we are learning is taking place, or we sign in and disappear, or we are okay. I think let's just keep engaging. Ask as many questions as possible. We say nothing is too simple to be misunderstood. So it's important as we listen to these conversations in future, let's just engage, and let's also then feedback in terms of these are eye openers. But when you go back to your function, what areas would you want your team members to be even developed in more? We are not at the same level as different organizations, but I think just looking at this, it can then you can then figure out the areas and reach out to us. That's why Karma is here to help us develop our capabilities. So reach out, raise the areas, and let's see if we can then come up with a solution together. Yeah, so thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Jones. We're so much grateful for your sacrifice in just helping us see these things as you are doing. And thank you, everyone else. A nice, good day.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Chair, for that. I wish to close the session, and you can close with a word of prayer. Faith and give the time to close with a word of prayer, and now end up the session.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Let us pray and believe as we close the meeting. Father, in the name of Jesus Christ, we come to you, thanking you for the blessings of this day and thanking you for the teachings and education we've been educated by Dr. Jones. We ask that you send us the Holy Spirit to guide us and enlighten us in our work so that we may actually be able to apply whatever we have learned and also engage in order to know more where we have not understood, so that we can also understand better and make our profession a successful one that will be admired by everyone within the world. I ask this prayer through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
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 Thank you
Thank you
for
very much, guys. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doc.
Jones.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Asante.
Thank you very much.